Well, hello again. This is the 18th of February 2023, and this is another Aughty Thoughty, me and my spin. And this is a very unusual one, because it's something that has been part of my cultural consciousness since childhood, and I've sort of revisited a few times, but has never really sort of flooded out and taken over everything in the way that it's currently doing, which I can't think of anything else that has ever really done this to me. And it's Father Ted, the classic sitcom Father Ted. I think that the sort of trigger for this has been my husband bought a box set for us to watch together. And went through the motions of, oh yeah, I used to love this, I haven't seen it for ages. And it's the first time I've ever actually sort of sat down and watched it in its entirety from, the first episode of Series 1 right through to the end of Series 3. There have been periods in the past when I've kind of got into, watching repeats, and when they sort of cycle through on a loop on, the far distant digital channels and things, but I've never sort of taken it series by series like this and sort of thought about it and analysed it in quite the same way. I have talked about it before in another vlog, actually, about characters who I consider to be clearly autistic, and I talked about Dougal. I think and nothing has really challenged that I've seen in this extended viewing session that I've been undergoing for the past week or so. In fact, if anything, I'm even more convinced. Perhaps a bit of attention deficit there as well. But yeah, he's definitely one of us. And well, I'll start by talking about what it means to me personally before I go on to observations about the series and associated subjects. I think it reminds me of sort of happy times in the past, let's say, that sort of went off the boil. I've always, been sort of very into comedy, both stand-up and sitcoms, and also all the sort of comedy game shows that are on, like, Have I Got News for You and QI and things. Before I stopped watching telly, it was in 2016. I think it was when I was a child. I used to go and stay at my grandparents' house quite a lot because I had a single mum who worked shifts, And my granddad would make me sort of little compilation videos of anything that was on there I might enjoy. And there'd be all the sort of sitcoms from the 70s, like, Rising Damp and Porridge and all that kind of thing. And maybe some nature films or something else I might like. And, once, it was probably the first broadcast, he'd take me the first ever episode of Father Ted. And I didn't really like it at first. I think I was too young to really understand it. I didn't really know what, Catholic priests were, I think. And a lot of the jokes just sort of went over my head, really. But probably by the time the last series was on, I can't remember exactly when this was. It might have been the last series or it might have been repeats. Staying at my dad's house. My dad used to sort of let me stay up and watch comedies, whereas my mum would not have done. So I sort of caught a few episodes that way, and then when my nan died, I'd sometimes go down to my granddad's house and sit with him in the evenings, and we'd have tea together, and we'd sort of sit and watch whatever was was on the far distant digital channels looping that we both liked, and sometimes it was Father Ted, and sort of sit and watch a few episodes of Father Ted together. And he got a video of the best of. So sometimes we'd sit and watch that if there was nothing else on. And then again, when I was pregnant, I had a few days off work sick, and I just started looking at things that might cheer me up. And I think that was the last time I sort of had a bit of a binge of Father Ted, just sort of selecting episodes that I could find online. And then there's this big gap right up until, well, not necessarily the present day, but certainly the present week. And yeah, as I'm watching it, I'm sort of going through all these sort of past times in my head of spending time with my granddad and my dad. And don't really see much of my dad these days, and my granddad's died, and there's that's sort of quite poignant, I think. And also, I did actually try and get started on a comedy career myself at one point. I started doing a lot of open mic nights, and well, for one thing and another, it wasn't going to happen. And I think going back to something that at the time was, well, part of the group of things, group of shows and performers and everything that I sort of looked to as an inspiration. I suppose it sort of sets me off thinking, what could have been. If I'd been in the right place at the right time with the right people and hadn't had agoraphobia flare-ups at inappropriate moments and things, what might I be doing now? I mean, obviously it didn't happen. Life took a different track, and I'm doing this now. But it does make me wonder about my sort of parallel universe life. And I suppose it was a kind of escapism for me as well when I was a kid. It was, I had a lot of things that I wasn't particularly happy about, not enjoying school and things. And the sort of, the comedy shows I enjoyed were an escape from that. Father Ted among them. There was some sort of whole raft of them that were quite a big deal for me. And I could sort of just tune into a sort of different world where my problems didn't exist anymore. Just sit and watch something silly and cheer myself up. Which I suppose leads quite nicely into my observations about the series itself. Because it's set on this little island, Craggy Island, which is it's an imaginary place. It's a fictitious place, and it's essentially comedy land. It's sort of almost semi-magical realm where the laws of logic and physics and human nature and such are sort of playing second fiddle to the law of what's funny. I mean that's kind of the nature of sitcom. Essentially, I think when they sort of try and go too deep and sort of follow a logical series of events, and I think it loses something. the funniest sitcoms, the ones that serve their purpose best, are the ones where, there's this sort of Groundhog Day theme of, the characters get up every day, have some sort of adventure, and then the next day everything's back to how it was before. The Father Ted universe begins and ends with, these four characters in the house together. There's no more to it than that. They don't really have consistent backstories. The series ends with them sort of considering emigrating, but then deciding not to. And it sort of fades out to Dougal saying, "You'll be staying with us forever and ever 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 and ever." A little montage of past scenes that you may have enjoyed. I think watching it through series by series as well, instead of just sort of picking and choosing odd little episodes here and there, which I've always done in the past, you do sort of notice the progression. I wouldn't say I have a favourite series particularly, but I think 2 and 3 form more of a cohesive whole. Whereas the first series is, you can tell that the writers and the actors and the set designers are just sort of throwing ideas around and seeing what sticks. It's very, very inconsistent, and there's, things, things that sort of seem to be starting off a running joke and then trail off. There's a few episodes where Dougal starts looking out the window with binoculars and seeing some sort of scene, like a stock footage of some ants or a hurricane or something, and then makes a comment about it, and that's the beginning of it. And then that just fades away, it just trails off, there's no more of that. And then you get to series 2, and clearly it's a new set. All the wallpaper's very different, and the sort of layout of the house is different. The layout of the house doesn't actually make as much sense in the later series, but it's, so what? It's one of those things, you just go with it, because it's not about making sense. It's about, being half an hour's escapism, really. And of course, it wasn't meant to be binged watched like that. It was meant to be watched sort of one episode a week, one series a year. Well, actually, there wasn't a series in 1997. It was 95, 96 and 98. So you weren't really supposed to remember every sort of throwaway remark that a character made about, say, the family or their past or anything like that. So if it doesn't add up week to week, like in one episode, it's just suddenly sprung on you out of nowhere for no reason that Dougal is an orphan, and while he's sort of processing that, once if you're watching the whole series together, it sort of occurs to you, hang on, he was talking about his mum in the present tense 2 episodes ago. What's going on here? And it seems like that if you start trying to analyse it and make it all make sense, then you'll just drive yourself insane, because it's not there to make sense. And I think probably one of the great successes of the show really is that it doesn't make a lot of sense. You do just sort of let yourself into this world where you know, and anything can happen really, and suspend your disbelief to a large extent. And you know, there is something sort of quite safe and comforting almost about knowing that, you know, whatever happens this episode, next episode, it'll all be the same again. You know, there's no permanent changes ever happen. I mean, even when it comes to an end, you know, it doesn't really, cause there's no sort of final blow. You know, it's not like, you know, they all decide they're going to give up the priesthood or whatever. You know, I don't know if maybe the writer sort of wanted to leave it open to maybe make another series. Apparently, you know, they had decided to leave it at the end of series 3, even though, you know, the star Dermot Morgan died the day after they finished filming. Apparently they had sort of come to the decision they were going to leave it there, just because they were running out of ideas, and, you know, the actors didn't want to get typecast, and they just decided that, you know, three series was enough. Which I'm inclined to agree with, to be honest. I think sitcoms that go on and on, the phrase "jumping the shark" gets thrown around. They do jump the shark, you know, like you know, Red Dwarf and Peep Show and Dad's Army. Even they go on so long, and then you get to the point that, you know, everyone involved has had enough. You know, that there isn't any more that you can get out of this situation. But, you know, when they try and keep pushing it, it just gets it loses something. And I mean, I'd like to be able to explain that a bit more articulately, but I can't quite bring the words to mind right now. I think maybe because you get used to, you know, the situation that you enjoy, you know, the characters that you got to know. It has to change eventually. There's only so much material you can get out of one show, and if it keeps going on and on, it comes to the point you have to make changes, and then, you know, it's not the same show anymore. But yes, it ended when it should have done, definitely. Apparently, you know, the day after Dermot Morgan died, you know, the producers were getting agents ringing up asking for asking for you know, parts for their actors, you know, who wanted to play Ted. Apart from this being a really inappropriate moment, you know, he died yesterday. No, there isn't going to be another one. So yeah, that happened. You know what, I'm just looking at the time. I'm going to stop this and do a part 2 for reasons of uploadability.